Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So this is a full spoiler breakdown of Metamorphosis, which is the 11th episode of Season 2 of The Bad Batch, and this episode is another genre exploration of a sort. So we've had, for example, the very Indiana Jones-like situation with Entombed. This time we've got a very Alien-like situation with the dark corridors and the barely glimpsed moments of seeing the reptilian beast with dripping jaws and sucking a limb into its mouth. Then later it becomes a King Kong style monster movie with that giant monster hanging off of the tower of the power station and swatting at things flying at it. But what is this crazy monster? Well, they do name it in the episode. It's the Zillo Beast, and if you have watched the entirety of the Clone Wars, you may remember it. It appeared in 2 episodes, in the 18th and 19th episodes from Season 2, which were called The Zillo Beast and The Zillo Beast Strikes Back, so I guess you could also say this episode, Metamorphosis, could also be called Return of the Zillo Beast. Thinking back to the Clone Wars episodes, though, at the very end of that 2-episode arc, the Zillo Beast is killed, and Palpatine tells the Doctor who has been assisting with this to clone the Zillo Beast. Now, it's a little bit odd in a way because the person he's talking to, Dr. Bull, is not a Kaminoan, so we don't necessarily know about other species and their ability to perform cloning, the monolithic cultures in Star Wars as they are. But this episode, Metamorphosis, shows us a payoff of that cliffhanger ending from the Clone Wars. It shows us that they were actually able to clone the Zillo Beast, which is a terrible, terrible idea. It's so bad, aside from the obvious reasons, that the Empire sends gunships to round up all the villagers who were witnesses to the Zillo Beast's rampage, and as Scorch, that's the clone commando who reports to Dr. Hemlock, says they've been rounded up and they're going to be quote-unquote dealt with, which is not just here's a wonderful consolation prize and we'll send you back to your planet situation. What this episode also does is give the Bad Batch still more fodder for breaking ties with Sid, and they're actually talking about it in the open now. There's a conversation after Sid gives them this job about how severing ties could be difficult. They'll have to do it somehow diplomatically because she knows too much about them, and the Batch is letting Omega be the one to air their grievances, probably thinking that she's the one who can get away with it with Sid, comparatively speaking, and they're not wrong about that. The domino effect of what happens in this episode, though, is kind of squarely on Sid's shoulders, because she's like, do you want to keep moping or do you want to make some money? And she sends them coordinates, but gives them limited intel, which Wrecker even notes is big surprise. And in their efforts to salvage cargo for Sid, they unwittingly turn the Zillo Beast loose and get it access to a power station for it to become enormous, and they're not able to do anything about it. The Empire, thankfully, in a way, shows up to prevent it from rampaging further, but then they take all of the villagers prisoners, so much for thankfully. So basically, Sid has sent them on a mission with limited intel that resulted in a bunch of villagers getting rounded up and who will eventually be disappeared. The one good thing, perhaps, that comes out of it is the fact that the Bad Batch realizes this was a Palpatine cloning situation, and they pass the information on to Rex and Echo, or they say they're going to, so at least some silver lining is available out of this situation. Meanwhile, while all of this is going on an unnamed planet, Tantus, Mount Tantus, has been named in the Bad Batch officially. It was only named in concept art, but now it's been given an official name, and the planet Wayland has been identified in this. Where that's happening, suddenly a Dr. Hemlock shows up. Dr. Hemlock's first appearance in Star Wars storytelling, and he wants Nala Se to give up her cloning information, and she's not going to cooperate. She says she knows what the Emperor wants, and she's not going to help him, so Hemlock gets Lama Su, the Prime Minister who has been in prison on Coruscant, to come, and somehow he's going to work out a deal with Lama Su to get Nala Se to cooperate, which involves finding Omega. Dun dun dun. This feels very much like a foundational setup for what will be a big finale in season 2 of The Bad Batch, so stay tuned to that developing storyline. And that's just about it. There's just two very tiny things. Jimmy Simpson is the person who voices Dr. Hemlock, and what a fantastic job he does. The menace in there is really palpable. And Keisha Castle Hughes is the voice of his partner in crime there on Mount Tantus, and that's notable because she played Queen Apollona in Revenge of the Sith, the Queen of Naboo who was at Padme Amidala's funeral. And that's what I've got for you for this breakdown review of Metamorphosis, which is episode 11 from season 2 of The Bad Batch, and that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.